Hi, my name is Jordan. I am a special education teacher from the UK. I share my passion for everything communication, sensory regulation and fun lesson ideas for my classroom of disabled pupils aged 4 to 11. Each week, I am joined by experts in the field, answering your questions and sharing our knowledge and experience working alongside our beautiful young people. Let's get started. Everybody, my name is Jordan and I am a special education teacher teaching autistic children aged 4 to 11 in the UK. And I thought we'd have a little Q&A today because I get so many amazing questions in my DMs and I love answering them. But not all of you can see the answers if they're in the DMs. What do you do when my son is sensory seeking? So there are lots of different ways you can sensory seek. What kind of senses is he seeking? Let's pin that post here because that is a good place to start. So what do you do when my son is sensory seeking? So it depends. Yeah, sensory seeking can look like lots of different things. So it can look like biting. It can look like jumping. It can look like licking. It can look like eating. It can look like hoarding. It can look like lots of different things. And usually, well, always it's because it's meeting a need, a sensory need that they're not getting otherwise. So it's really good to try and find, if it's not as safe, it's really good to try and find a safe alternative that they can meet that need. So I don't know if you want to comment back and say what need it is. I don't know if I found it. Oh, wiggly and noise with mouth. Okay. So they're really wiggly and they love making noises. Okay, so they obviously have lots of excess energy to get out. And so a really good way of doing this is by having regular movement breaks. And some people don't do this how I think they should be done. And they just do the movement breaks. So they have a big dance around or a jump around, or they have a trampoline, and then they expect that that's let them all out, and then they just come back inside and they're still not okay. But all you've done there is you've raised their heartbeat and you've got them so excited that they're even more wiggly, and then you're like, why aren't they sitting still? They should be exhausted by now. But really you've just, made them even more excited. So there's two other steps that we're missing here. You do the alert stage, which is the jumping and the dancing and the running around, and get that heartbeat raised. And then there's two others. The first is organising. So you want to do some kind of cross-body activity or fine motor activity where they have to really organise their bodies. So it could be balancing is a really good one. It could be stacking is another good one. It could be, what are other ones? Yeah, there's lots. I've got a whole sheet about it basically. And then the third step you want to do, because you're still not quite ready yet, the third step is grounding, and that can look like squeezes, or it can look like weighted blankets, or it can look like slow press ups or breathing exercises. So for those really wiggly children, I would be suggesting those 3 steps and doing it regularly, not just when they need it, but even if they don't look like they need it, I would still be doing it regularly. And regularly means at least every hour, I would say, at school and at home. And if they're not getting it at all at school, then you're probably finding at home that they're getting even more wiggly because they've got so much excess energy to let out. And then with the noise with the mouth, it's sometimes really pleasurable for our children to, make noises with their mouths. It could be because it feels good making that shape with their mouth and their tongue. So our tongue is the only muscle in our bodies that is accessible, which is why crunchy foods are really good and vibrating toothbrushes are really good, because you get a lot of sensation through the tongue. So it could be that the noise that they're making is really pleasurable for the feeling of their mouth, but also could be auditory as well. They could really genuinely love the sounds and the pitch of the sounds that they're making, or the echo that occurs. They could also like your reaction as well, because when they're, quiet and getting on, you get on with your day and that's fine, everybody does. But if they're making these noises and wiggles and pushing and all those kind of things, and then it makes it a bit like a game with you, then that could be a learnt way of them having a fun interaction with you. If their social skills aren't neurotypical, that could be a learnt way that they have learnt to interact with you and have a fun game with you. So for the noise one, also could be that they're sound sensitive to other noises around the house if it's a bit of a busy environment, or even if it's like quite busy as in not even sound, but even just looking, if it's quite a cluttered environment, then they could be making noises to kind of distract from that kind of thing as well. So sometimes ear defenders work really well, and sometimes echoing their sounds works really well, because then they get a bit of a conversation, a two-way conversation with you. Is a really, really fun way of if they're the sounds, and it encourages, you know, that two-way conversation. It kind of lets you know that you're trying to learn their language, which is really, really lovely, and often gets a really lovely and fun response. And also maybe some sound toys as well, because then there's an off button. I hope that helps. I hope that answers your question. Well, there are so many already. Hello, everybody. Let's go to the next one. Hey, would you recommend your curriculum to a mainstream non-verbal room? That is an interesting question. I wonder why you have a whole room of non-verbal children in the mainstream classroom, but I suppose lots of people do now. Yes, so my curriculum is built for my class specifically, who are who are all have a speech something. One of them is echolalic, or has Gestalt processing learning language. Gestalt language processing, sorry. But all the others are non-speaking. So it is built for them, and they are all working from 0, about 6 years old maximum, but maybe like 5 years old maximum. So regardless of what age your children are, if they're working at a 0 to age 6 level, if they are needing to learn in a sensory way, if they have language, needs, or social care needs, extra needs, then I would say it would be pretty perfect. And even if your school has a curriculum already, lots of the topics I cover are very typical topics, so you can kind of reorder it. And there is a button as part of my curriculum that says edit, so you could put your own edits and ideas in there, make it specific for your class, because I'm really aware that I've never had one class the same, and one child comes in and it changes the whole class. So I thought it was really important when building a curriculum that it's just as editable as we do every single year for our classes. So yeah, that's an option as well if you wanted to make it even more specific with as far as like learning objectives go, and just day-to-day planning. If you wanted to make it more specific and more personal, then yeah, it's all editable. Another question. I'm loving these questions so far. I watched your lives the first week of the holidays and mentioned you were moving away from PECs. Just wondered why and what you use instead. Oh, it's a great question. God, you guys are coming up with the questions. Yes, I am moving away from PECs, and most people are as well, because it is seen as non-autism affirming. And what I mean by that is it's very limited. So for PECs, it's very much requesting, isn't it? It's, I want this. So I want food, or I want toy. Well, what if they wanted to say, there's so much more to conversation than that, isn't there? What if they wanted to say, that was a really funny joke, or isn't the sky really lovely? And I know you can do that to a certain extent in PECs, like later on, but actually it's a really crucial part of language and the enjoyment of language, just commenting on things, not just requesting all of the time. So that's the first reason why I'm moving away. The second reason is because the official way of teaching PECs kind of always found a little bit odd. You need 2 adults for a start. So one, it feels pretty impossible in a class to have that much going on. You know, I don't have that many adults to do that in the first place. But even if I did, it's it's not child-led, it's very adult-led. If they pick the wrong thing, you're not supposed to give it to them. It can be, it's like hand over hand, and it's very like, this is how you do it. Don't get me wrong, it works. I've used it for 15 years in my class, and it does support learners to find a voice, and I'm all for that, which is why I still have it around in my class. I still have symbols, I still have symbol books, and I'll never take it away from a child if they're already using it. However, with my new learners, so the 4 to 6 year olds, what I've started doing is having choosing boards around so they can still say that I want in da 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 da, but also having other things that they can comment on. Something silly, something's funny, different emotions, just different things rather than just requesting all of the time. And I like doing that with the AAC. So you might have heard me also mention AAC. It's augmented devices, and often these are on iPads. Here is a free example. Let me just show you. Here we go. So this is one I set up for a puzzle. Ironically, it does say I want at the top of it. But there's also yes, no, finished. You could put anything on there.
Moose.
And then when you tap it, it speaks. This is the Twinkle Symbols app.
I want turtle, polar bear, puffin, try again. Yes, finished.
So this is one that I created so that we can play a game together, and I would be modelling what they need to find next, and then we can comment on try again. Yes, you did it. And it's just feels more like actual conversation than just requesting. Is kind of why we're going away from PECs. Is there another? Oh, the other reason is that it takes so long to make the symbols, and the symbols are so limiting. So if I don't make a symbol for the child, they can't ask for it, even if it's their favourite thing. If I haven't made it, they can't ask for it. And usually it's their favourite things that the symbols always get ripped and wrecked. And then it takes, a day minimum to make a new symbol. So they've lost their voice for a whole day whilst they're waiting for me to make another symbol. Whereas with AAC, which is what we're going to, the iPads, it's always there. And if they need it, it can be there within seconds because I can just find it, or they can find it, or we can create it, and it's there. It doesn't tarnish, it doesn't rip, it doesn't break. It's just there, and it's always in the same place. It doesn't get lost. So just from a practical level as well, they've got their whole voice at all times, in home and in school. It doesn't get lost. So yeah, there's lots of reasons why we're going away from PECs. Speech and language therapists will more and more will be going away from PECs and going to more autism affirming practices like AAC. I also use sound buttons in my class. So for children that aren't yet understanding symbols or photos, they are using sound buttons, and this will usually start with a finished sound button. So before rather than just moving the child on from here and then here and then here and then here is what it must feel like. They're like, whoa, where am I? What am I doing? We're saying finished, and then it's the same sound every time. It's like an instrument maybe, and then they get used to, oh, okay, this is coming to an end and I'm about to go somewhere else. And then we start to do the sound button alongside an object that represents where they're going next. So it'll be finished, and then now it's a pad because we're going to the toilet, or now it's a plate because it's snack time, or a bit of astroturf because we're going outside. And it's the start of us using a schedule. It's the start of using symbols to match. It's the start of using an AAC device. So we also use that a lot in my room as well. Yeah, there are all sorts of communication going on in my room, and we will always use symbols because for some children they just need it. And some places you can't take iPads. Like I've just been swimming with my foster child, and you can't take an iPad swimming. So we'll have to find other ways that we can communicate with each other in the pool, for example. And maybe laminated symbols is a good way of doing that, maybe. So yeah, we're always trying to find new ways. But for the most part in my room, we are going much more the AAC route rather than symbols. I hope that makes sense. I think I just waffled there. I have a little boy, 6, diagnosed with autism, who is constantly throwing everything. He also has a stim, which is hitting something into his chin over and over, which is cutting and bruising it. Yeah, I've seen this before, actually. Again, your chin is really tough, isn't it? Really tough. You feel it. It's got a big bone there. And it does actually feel quite nice to press. I quite like it anyway. And often this is an area that you will see children hitting. And here as well, again, it's quite a tough place, and you'll often see this kind of movement. I don't know if you've seen that before. Again, that's quite tough, and that's quite tough, isn't it? So basically they're sensory seeking, right? They're seeking that pressure, that deep pressure. And there are two things that I've found that really help this. One is finding ways that you can give them that deep pressure a little bit more safely that's not hurting them. There are lots of different ways you can do that. Oh, I've got something actually which is really fun. This does it. It's like, I won't blow it up because it's huge, but I'll show you the box. It's the same texture as not a lilo, what do you sleep on? It's like a lilo, but like velvety kind of. What am I talking about? You know the beds. You know what I mean. It's like a velvety kind of fabric, and it blows up like a big canoe. Now these are great to get inside. They're called pea pods. It's really great to get inside, and it kind of gives you a squeeze all down your sides and not down your feet. And these are fantastic for children that need that squeeze but don't want to be so close to somebody, because this is the problem, is that they need that deep pressure, but actually they find being so close to a person completely intolerable when they're in that state of dysregulation. Or anyway, but especially when they're in that state of dysregulation. So these pea pod chairs give you a massive hug all the way down and give you a big squeeze. Another one is a weighted blanket. So I've got a weighted blanket here. Again, it's fantastic for giving you that squeeze kind of feeling without having that really close contact. That's fantastic. Another thing is it's called a hug. I think it's just called a hug. A hug, it's like a waistcoat. It's basically strapped around your chest, and then it has two Velcro straps either side. I think it's called like a hug belt or something. And that again, it gives you that deep pressure without having somebody so close to you. So that could be really good rather than them doing this kind of thing. But usually this comes from, yes, sensory seeking, but also frustration. So I'd really look into what is making them feel frustrated, because behaviour is communication. So think about what they're communicating. What is making them so frustrated? Is it a demand that you could just reduce and just get rid of? Do they need to do that thing? Like, do they need to wear their shoes to get into the car, or could you just walk barefoot and then put your shoes on when you get there? Or do we need to leave right now? Is it because we're rushing them? And actually, do we need to just give them a bit of more time to reduce that demand so they don't get as frustrated? So that's another option. Is it anxiety? So do they know what's happening next? And maybe some kind of schedule would help them to know what's happening next. Do they have a good communication method? So rather than showing frustration by doing this, maybe they could show, I'm getting frustrated, and what strategies would you have around that? Maybe they have a box that you bring out that has some kind of vibration tools in it, or hard chewies. Chewing something with your teeth is much better than chewing something here. Maybe something vibrating in your mouth might give the same effect, and then you could offer that box to them if they're showing those frustrations, or if they're asking for it, they could have the box. It's about thinking about, why are they doing those things? What is the trigger? And offering a safer alternative for them. And if it is genuinely meeting that need, they don't want to be hurting themselves either. So they will take the easiest route to get their needs met. So as long as it is meeting their need, then they will go for it. If they don't go for it, then it's obviously not quite meeting the right need, and you can keep experimenting. He's hitting something into his chin, so we've gone over that, and we're just cutting and bruising it. Yeah, I've seen a lot of self-harm type behaviours with our children, and it's really, it's probably one of the hardest as a caregiver to see that. It's really, really hard, really emotionally hard, but try not, it's not personal, and just know that it is okay, and there are ways of going around it. Another thing that really helped one of my pupils that was going through an episode of this is intensive interaction. So it almost doesn't feel like it should be linked at all. But intensive interaction is a beautiful way of just relationship building. So when they're in a state of regulation, when they're in a state of calm, so not when he's doing any of these things, but when he's in a state of calm, kind of follow his flow of movements and sounds. So say if he's rocking and babbling and stimming like this, then you find something that you can rock and stim and babble with too, and really find that flow. And when he flicks it, you flick it. And then when he says a certain phrase or sounds, you say a certain phrase and sounds, and eventually he'll notice that you're doing that and kind of conduct you in a way, and he'll really enjoy that you're learning his language, and he'll often find it quite fun. But it just tells them, I get it, I'm here for you, I understand you, I'm trying to understand you at least, you can speak to me, I'm somebody that can relate to you, and I'm really trying hard. And then when it does get to the frustrating times, you'll be even more of a person that he trusts, and because you've built that loyalty and that relationship. It's a really, really wonderful tool, and it really helped to build relationships with a pupil that sounds very similar to this one that you described. So yeah, I would definitely say about sensory things more appropriate, but also just look at relationship building as well. I have a young man who pushes his chin into the desk. Yeah, exactly, similar. So similar kind of feeling. It's a really hard bone there, but it actually doesn't hurt too much to actually hit it. I find the same with foreheads as well. I know a few forehead butters, and it's quite a hard bone, isn't it? So you get quite a lot of stimulation from that, because it's quite tough. Not as much from your cheeks, a bit softer, but from the chin I can see why that would meet some needs. What are some signs that a child needs extra help, and how do you address it with parents? Yeah, this is a really tricky one, because usually, maybe I'm not the right teacher to answer this, because usually parents have to really fight to get their children into a class like mine. They've already got an EHCP. If the parents weren't on board, usually it wouldn't happen for a child. So usually, once they're in a class like mine, that's kind of the end of the fight. So usually I don't find that I have to approach the parents in that way. So I'm probably not the right person to ask that question. But some signs would be they're struggling to make friends, or struggling to keep up with the work that the others are doing. They're getting very emotionally dysregulated, or they're getting really tired, or they're struggling with their emotions in some way, or they're they're seeming really despondent. Can be a real sign that they're not coping. Fight or flight kind of things as well. So if they're often getting into trouble all the time, or not sitting still, or not concentrating all of the time, can be a real sign that they need a bit more help. Yeah, I mean, we all see them in our classes, don't we, as teachers, those children that probably need that little bit of extra help. And so I think there would be some signs. But yeah, as far as talking to parents, I think just be honest with them at parents' evening and things, and just say what you're noticing, because also if they have siblings that, some things are genetic, right? If they have siblings that are displaying similar behaviours or more severe sometimes, parents might not be aware it's not neurotypical behaviours. So just approaching them honestly and kindly from a place of love could help. And if you need extra support with that, maybe ask the Senko to be there during the meeting as well. This is a lovely comment as well. I think a movement break needs to be a change of scenery. That's a really good point, and something that I haven't actually acknowledged. But yeah, we always, when we do a movement break, we always change scenery. We always either go outside or we go to a different area in the classroom. And yeah, you're right, part of the sensory break and the act of doing a sensory break is just getting space as well, and getting a breath of fresh air and coming back fresh. So yes, you've done all your movement breaks, which keeps you fresh as well, but actually just stepping outside sometimes and coming back in a few moments later can also have the same effect. So I love that observation. We do the same. Okay, yeah, this is a good comment. Okay, so my son is 4 and non-verbal. How can I get him to communicate? He does pecks at school, but won't do them for me. He's hand-led. I think that's okay. I think it's okay that however he chooses to communicate at home with you is perfectly fine. Don't see symbols as a step on from hand leading. That's always, it might be what they say in the reports, like that's what we're doing next. But any communication is good communication. Also, school parents understand far more what their child is asking of them than the school will. So he'll have to be working harder at school to be able to communicate and make his needs known, because they're staff and they have other children to meet, and he might be working a little bit harder. So giving him a bit of respite from that at home is absolutely okay, because that's his safe space. And the fact that he's hand leading you is fantastic, I would say, because he is requesting and he is communicating. I would maybe, to encourage even more of that, I would be modelling. So model what you would like to see, maybe different words, different foods that he wants or toys that he wants, and just model, with no expectation that he will copy or no expectation that he will even join you, but just model. And if you want him to be able to use an AAC device like on the iPad, you do it. If you want him to use symbols, then you use symbols to communicate. If you want him to do sign, you use sign. And with no pressure, with no demand on him. And then maybe one of them will fit him better than the other. But the fact that he's hand leading, I would say, is fantastic. So don't feel like that's less than what he's doing at school. I think it is perfectly great that he is communicating in all areas. What can be done for visual stimming, such as side glancing? Okay, what can be done for visual stimming, such as side glancing? Side glancing is really common. This is when children look with the side of their eyes. So this can be... So when you look from the side of your eye gets strained. So again, you're kind of putting your eye to its limit and it's feeling pressure. So it's just as much about proprioception as it is about meeting your visual sensory seeking needs. So again, it's all about squeezing and that deep pressure grounding kind of stuff as well. So squeezes, weighted blankets, anything, deep pressure massages as well, which will also help, the eyes. It could also be a bit of blinkered vision. It could be that they're quite sensitive to light or busyness. So it could be by looking to the side of their eye, they've actually can only take in that. It's a bit more blinkered, and that's just how they manage to cope with it. But I would also suggest it's probably they're getting something out of the pressure of it, and there may be tiptoe walkers as well. Again, a similar thing. They're getting that pressure by being a tiptoe walker. So I would do lots of squeezes and grounding exercises for that one. Oh my goodness, you guys are talking so much. I can't find them. Okay. Sorry. I'm going to pick some questions that I think I can answer. Okay, this one's an interesting question. Any ideas to get a 4-year-old boy to sit with neurotypical group at preschool for activities? So there's an order of development we're talking about here. Obviously I don't know this boy. So first of all, it's always, there's an order of things before sitting and concentrating and learning can happen. It's, do they feel safe? Are they fed? Are they under shelter? Are they clothed kind of level? And then it's sensory. So he needs to be regulated in order to sit with his peers. So I would be doing the 3-part sensory circuits. First of all, so he's regulated. And then there's fine motor control and gross motor control. Again, that kind of comes into the sensory circuits. And then there is some social skills and emotional regulation. So I'd be doing lots of work with him around turn taking and waiting for your turn for short stints and building up that. And then it's also just about interest. So I'd put something super motivating that he loves on the table and just see if he comes to the table. Maybe not even sitting. Maybe that's not the actual goal here. Maybe the goal is just for him to join his peers. So I wouldn't worry too much about getting him sat, because sometimes that can feel quite entrapping. So I would, just put something super motivating that they all enjoy onto the table and just see if he wants to. He might find that the whole group or small group activity is just far too overwhelming and just wants to observe. And I would just take note of that as well and maybe just honour that, because that's him. That's great. That's him regulating himself. And we want to praise that as well. But if you feel like he can, definitely try and put something that motivates all of them onto the table and see if he wants to join on his terms when he's regulated and when he feels ready. without pressure. Will you be doing more bucket videos? My kids love those. Yes, I will. Maybe weekends and holidays, maybe? Just because by the time I get home from teaching, it's going to be too late for your kids, and I don't want to excite them before bath and bed, because you guys will hate me. So maybe a holiday thing. I know it helped a lot of children. I got DMs about it helping a lot of children through the holidays because it kind of gave some kind of consistency and routine and was kind of related to school in a way. And I love that. I love that that was what it was providing for them. So yeah, maybe school holidays, just to keep that it not so different from school, what they usually do at school. So there's a little bit of consistency and flimp at home during the holidays. But I did really like doing it. It was really fun. What other questions have we got? What's your advice on a non-verbal child running out of the room every day? Well, first of all, my classroom has locked doors. It would be far too unsafe for us to have unlocked doors. So maybe that's an easy solution, is to just have a PIN code on your door. If you feel like that's the safest way, if you feel like it's really unsafe, maybe that's, a safe solution. Also have a think about why they're running. So is it because they want to run and they need the space? So maybe think about, I feel like a broken record, but having a sensory diet consistently, every hour, every half an hour through your day, so that they could get their running in and get a bit more regulated. Or it might be because the classroom's a little bit too overwhelming, maybe a bit too busy, a bit too noisy, and they need to get out and get away and they need a break from that. So kind of listen to this communication, see this behaviour as a communication, and think about, okay, what is it telling us? Is it telling us that he needs a run? Is it telling us that they are finding this room too overwhelming and we need to build a little space for them somewhere in the room, somewhere in the classroom that's a bit less colourful, or a bit less hectic, little bit less busy? And you can do this with blankets, you can do this with screens, you can do this with, little quiet corners. And maybe that is the solution. But ultimately, if you feel like your children are unsafe because they are running out, then it's absolutely okay to put a PIN pad, like a PIN code lock on your door, if that's going to keep them safe, whilst also honouring and listening to that communication that maybe something else needs to change in the classroom too. I hope that helps. The question. Airbed, that's the word. Well done. Well, a child who spits. Okay, this is a really tricky one, isn't it? Because spitting is seen as so not okay and seen as really rude in our culture. Often, adults find this spitting really difficult. Spitting and smearing is often the ones I get, problems with most, because it's so not the done thing. Whereas in other cultures, spitting isn't seen as quite so bad, but it's seen as really unhygienic. So again, let's think about why they're doing this. What happens when they are spitting? Is it because they want people to get out of their space? And by spitting, it immediately moves people out of their space and away from them. Maybe it's learnt behaviour in that way, that when I want somebody to step back out of my face and stop talking to me, I spit and it works. So first of all, think about, what are they getting out of this behaviour? And then finding another way of going around that. Maybe give them an opportunity to ask for space in a different way. Maybe they have a certain symbol that's always honoured and respected. Maybe you speak to your adults about, when they're starting to look like they're starting to wobble, maybe step back and get out of their space so that they don't have to spit But also spitting can just be a really enjoyed sensory activity. I've had children that spit and smear on tables and on windows and kind of enjoy drawing with it and enjoy wiping with it and enjoy playing with spit. It's really common, and it seems to just be really enjoyed. So what I've done for the spit drawers is I made a solution of washing up liquid, really, really quite heavy on the washing up liquid, and a little bit of water. And it kind of has a similar consistency, but obviously it's much more hygienic. and then they could have that on their table at all times, and they drew with that on the windows and the tables, and I didn't mind that. That was absolutely fine by me, and they could have that whenever they wanted, and then a little tissue beside them. There's also children that I've had in the past that like to watch their spit falling, and then in that case I would just give them a cup of water or a spray or some pipettes, and again like try and mimic the enjoyment they're getting out of the spitting, whether it's the spit falling or the spit landing or the mark it makes or whatever it is. Just try and replicate it in a more appropriate or safe way, and that might be a good way of round it as well. Yeah, but it is one that often people struggle with. Okay, this is a good one. Where's this one gone? Okay, here. Right. I have 2 boys in my class who tear up drawings or work they're proud or something that makes them really happy of when I come over to see. Just wondering why they do it and how I can help. Some children really struggle with praise. I have a child in my school that if you praise him, it's a real trigger for him. So you just have to learn, like, even though it feels good for us, that he just can't cope with praise. And it could be learned behaviour. So it could be that, I don't know, he's been through some kind of trauma and for whatever reason can't cope with the praise. Where's my needle gone? I lost it. Yeah, he can't cope with the praise. Or it could be that he has very low self-esteem and can't cope with the praise. Or it could be that he doesn't like the attention of all eyes on him when he is praised. So just be mindful of that. And just respect that, really. No adults that don't like having the spotlight on them and being praised either. So just kind of, try and respect that communication. As far as ripping work, it can be a self-esteem thing as well. If it's not, then it's not good enough, and they might see through your false praises, like that they've tried really hard or whatever, but they know it's not perfect, so it's not good enough. And again, you have to respect that it's their work, and maybe a social story around that and around building confidence and around things not having to be perfect, and actually it's really difficult to have something perfect and you can always get better. Maybe the social story around that would help alleviate some of those feelings of everything having to be perfect. But again, it's really common, especially with children with an ASD diagnosis, that everything would have to be perfect or right to be good enough. What about 2-year-olds? What about 2-year-olds with my teaching plan? 0 to 6 with my curriculum. It kind of doesn't matter what age they are, but if they're working at a 0 to age 6 level, then it would work really well. Okay, should I use symbols or real life images, so like photos, for now and next and timetables? It really doesn't matter. You could even use objects. It depends where the children are at. So the usual level or the order of things would be an object first. So the actual object. So if they are going home, it would be their actual bag to go home. Or if they are going, it would be their actual coat, And then it's objects of reference. So it's kind of similar. It's still objects, but the object would represent something. So it doesn't have to be their actual coat or their actual plate for lunch. It's just a little plate or a coat, a toy coat, for example, that is a reference to what that means. So that's an object of reference. And then the usual next step is photos. So it would be a photo of the car or a photo of the park or a photo of school, because they're a little bit easier to recognise. And then it would be a symbol. The symbol then represents school or home or car or breakfast. But it might not be that exact one, They're kind of getting used to that things out of context the symbol can mean lots of different things. That's the problem with photos, that it kind of only means that one thing. But symbol can mean lots of different things. And then, and I suppose it would be signing and speech. But I say that as an order, like children can just choose one and skip one, and it's not really linear like that. It really is about preference and what works for the child. But that's kind of typical that I see most often. So as for should I use symbols or real life images for now and next and timetables, just see what your child gravitates towards. Maybe make photos and symbols and objects and just see what they get on best with and prefer. That's how I like to do it in my room. That's why I have so many options on offer all of the time. My stories are crazy because they have sensory items, they have signing, I have objects, I have AAC going on, I've got all sorts. But it's because I want it to be accessible for all and to give them all the opportunity to just pick whatever they want. And sometimes it's surprising which child will choose which one, you know, as a preference. Yes, I would just have all of them and just see what they gravitate towards. I've got such good questions. Somebody's asked about swimming. Any ideas for a child when at the swimming pool swallowing water? They just do it. It's quite a developmental thing as well. If you have babies in the water, they often will swallow a lot of water. Maybe using flotation devices to get their head up, but ultimately it's really hard to stop. I go swimming every week and I swear the pool must be half as deep when we get out. There's so much pool water drank. It's a hard one to stop, isn't it? Yeah, maybe distraction, I suppose, rather than just keeping reminding them, because it will get really boring really quickly. I would just do distraction. Maybe stay in the shallow so that they're kind of stood up and do some kind of pouring activities or splashing activities and just kind of distract them from wanting to drink it. But apart from that, just kind of gotta, go with it really. Oh, this is a good one. What is the best resource or intervention that you have found to be the most valuable and why? I think intensive interaction, because it is completely free. There are no resources. All you need is yourself and the child. And it is the most autism affirming intervention ever, because you are literally getting your child to conduct you. They are leading it without even realizing. And it's been going on for ages now. And all the other ones that I can think of around that time have kind of being phased out, apart from this, because it is so autism affirming. I explained a little bit about it before. It's written by Dave Hewitt. So if you go onto YouTube or Google Dave Hewitt intensive interaction, you'll find tons of examples of what I mean by the child conducting the adult I shouldn't say child and adult, the carer kind of following the flow of the person that they're looking after. And they have names for them, the people, and it is so affirming because you are learning their language. You're not putting any demands on them. You're not having any expectations of them of something that they can't do. In fact, you're realizing how difficult it is to make their sounds and their movements, and they're an expert in their sounds and movements, and you're now the learner, which is so affirming. It is so great for confidence building, relationship building, boosting self-esteem, learning two-way conversation. So many children I work with, when I first work with them, seem so stuck in their own world because they can meet their own sensory needs. They are terrified of the outside worlds because it just is scary and it puts demands on them and they don't get it, and it's just terrifying. So they've locked themselves away in their own world, and it's really hard to get in. It's really hard to build a relationship with them. It's really hard to just get in to their world. And intensive interaction is a beautiful way of tapping into their world, and in turn building their confidence that they are then more interested in our world. And maybe it's not so scary. Maybe there are people out there that are willing to learn their language and try. Just beautiful. And we use it all the time in my room. So if I could just choose one resource or intervention, it would be you as the caregiver is the resource, and the intervention would be intensive interaction. I don't know if any other practitioners agree with me with that, but I think I'd drop anything else for that. Okay, so what can stimming look like? I have a neurodivergent family and I don't know what it looks like, so I get super confused when they do something and I don't know if it's a stim or not. Stim is basically just stimulating behaviour. That's all it means. So it can be twiddling hair. It can be waving something in front of your eyes. it can be flapping, it can be rocking, it can be enjoying light or shadows, anything that is stimulating to them. It can be colouring in, even can be rolling something like Play-Doh, it can be squeezing Play-Doh, any kind of repetitive, enjoyable, stimulating behaviours that they're doing, that could be classed as stimming. They have ADHD and I pick, my skin is a stim. That's quite a common one with women that have ADHD. So I pick my nails and pick my hands or pick my face or pick my hair. You'll see I touch my face a lot as well when I'm talking. That's like a repetitive, stimulating behaviour. Yeah, and I like go up on my toes and I spin as well. And if I'm on a shiny surface, like I've got concrete floors all through my house. So that's something that I do, that I notice. And again, it's just repetitive, stimulating behaviours that either you are aware of or aren't aware of, but it helps you regulate. So it could be, yeah, you'll see it in lots of different things. If you've got a neurodivergent family, you'll be seeing all sorts of different types of stimming behaviour. Let's go to some of the people that have used the actual question things. What would you recommend for people? Okay, this one comes up a lot. Okay, what would you recommend for pupils who bite staff or pupils? This is also another really common one that I get a lot, because biting is seen as really extreme, and it can be really extreme sometimes. I have rarely seen children sharing some kind of frustration. They sometimes bite themselves or they bite other people. I would be seeing that as communication and see what demands you're putting on them unnecessarily that could be causing that frustration, and what you could reduce. So maybe reducing their timetable or demands on them, reducing anything that might be causing them that extreme frustration if you can. Some things you can't get rid of. Some things, they have to be dressed or they have to do certain things. At school, for example, it's just part of, you can't get rid of that, or they have to have a drink or whatever, whatever it is. Sometimes it's meeting their basic needs. And then I guess that there might be other things that you could do. Offer really hard chewies. I only ever recommend one type of chewy. It's by TTS. There's like 4 different ones. It's in my Amazon storefront. If you want a link to it, it's not an affiliate link or anything. I'm not associated with them in any way, but it is the only chewies I recommend because they actually last. And yeah, I've known lots of very, very big hard biters, and it seems to be doing the job. They're kind of like knobbly and they're really good. And there's 4 different shapes for their preference as well, which I like. So yeah, if they're biting, then maybe try chewies, and also step out of their space. They can't bite you if you're not within mouth reach of them. So as long as they are safe and not causing harm to themselves, then sometimes stepping into their space is only making things harder. So I would always opt for, if you can safely, just stay out of their space, and then they won't bite. Okay. How to help in a situation where a student deliberately pushes others' buttons. So again, you need to see this behaviour as a communication. Maybe they don't know how to make friends or play and interact in a appropriate way, or what we see as an appropriate way. So it's all about teaching them other ways that they can get those interactions. Maybe the only way that they get that interaction is by pushing their buttons. Maybe that's the only way they get that response, or any response from them. So I like to use the intervention Lego therapy with some more able learners or attention autism, with classes like mine, because it teaches other ways of getting those fun interactions with each other that are positive and that are enjoyed by all parties, and really praising and having those on offer and modelling that play as an adult as well, getting on the floor and modelling positive relationships and play. Again, intensive interaction is another great way of doing that, is modelling that reciprocal play, so that a child doesn't have to deliberately push others' buttons in order to get that response or that kind of interaction. And without us modelling that, they might not work that out on their own. Other questions? Okay. Somebody said, advice for wanting to get into SEN teaching, but being autistic and ADHD myself, I'm scared they will judge me as inferior if I tell them. That is absolutely not the case. I haven't found that for sure. In fact, most of the staff in my room are neurodivergent, and I think that's what makes us so good at our jobs, because we totally relate to lots of what the children are going through. So I would wear it like a badge if you feel proud enough to, and I would absolutely say that and speak about it as one of your strengths for the job as an SEN teaching assistant or teacher, especially when it becomes to relating to your students. There obviously are downsides to it, which I find as well. Sometimes organisation, sometimes mine is, and maybe you talk to them. That's another reason to mention it in an interview, is because maybe you need a little bit more support in those areas, and unless they know why, they might not be able to offer that support. So I would say most schools would be incredibly understanding if you mentioned your neurodiversity in that way. What did you do as your degree? Was it a PGCE? Yes, I did. My route into SEN teaching was I was TA, a special education school, so specialist provision school, whilst I was doing my acting degree. And then straight from my acting degree, I did a PGCE in primary education. And then I went straight back to that school as soon as I was qualified as an underqualified teacher and then teacher, and I was there for 10 years. And then I ran my own consultancy business for sensory parents, and now I've come back full circle as a teacher and SEN foster carer. So that's kind of my route in. I've been doing it for 15 years now, which is crazy. How do you deal with children that don't like sharing? So how do I support children share? So I model it, first of all, with my turn, your turn, and I also have a my turn and wait visuals as well. You might have seen those in my post a few days ago. They're like ovals, my turn and wait, and they're coloured green and red. And I'll model my turn first, then your turn, and they will only have to wait like 3 seconds at first, and then it's their turn, and then they might have to wait 5 seconds, and then 10 seconds, and 15 seconds, and gradually they'll get to build the understanding that this is a promise that I'm definitely going to get what I want. And now lots of my children now can wait up to 20 minutes for their turn, because they have the wait in front of them and they know that that's a promise that they're definitely going to get a turn. And that's really great for sharing and turn taking. So if there's one resource that all of them want, then I use the green card for my turn, and then everybody else will have a wait symbol, and then they will wait for their turn. And it works really well if used consistently and modelled by adults. And that is in my Google Drive if you want that one. Job share. This is a good question. Do you find it hard being job share? One of our children has 2 fantastic one-to-ones, but he is making limited progress. I've tried lots of things, but wondered if it's to do with the change in adult. It can be, we're not robots. However much we try and be consistent, we're very much 2 separate humans, and we do work in very different ways actually. Like naturally, we're very naturally different people. However, what we are consistent with is the big things. We run the class in a really similar way. Our expectations of the children and the adults are very similar, and we use the same structures. So we use the same language, we use the same communication methods, we use the same visuals and structure in that way. We talk constantly. So we at least message 2 or 3 times a week in a really long, like, this is what's happened, this is how I think, what do you think, and like kind of make decisions together. Really, really helps avoid this. However, naturally, staff and children might gravitate towards or prefer the way that one teacher works over the other, and it could be just because of the subjects they teach. Like, it might not even be anything personal to do with them, and that's just human nature as well. But it's just about being as consistent as possible and talking with each other. It could be that it's because of 2 people, but there are lots of benefits from having 2 people as well. We both come with full energy. Usually when I was working full time, by Thursday I was flagging, because as you can imagine, you've seen my lives, I give full energy all times. So by Thursday I was so exhausted, whereas now my colleague can tap out on a Wednesday and I tap in on a Thursday, and I'm like ready to go, full energy, and it kind of boosts the room to like keep going till the end of the week. So I think actually there are more benefits than not just having that like change of face, boosted energy, fresh ideas, being able to share burdens and certain things and share ideas and certain things. So yeah, I think there is huge benefits. But if your child has autism or any kind of anxiety, just that change in slight different ways of working, because like I say, we're not robots, we are human, really could affect them. And it might take them a couple of days to kind of like get into the swing of the next person, and then it's the weekend, and then it's the next person. So yeah, it really could be having an impact. However, it would also be having an impact if they only worked with one person, because they'd only get used to that one person and that one way of doing things. And that's just not realistic in life. Like being velcroed and stuck to one person and their one way of working is just going to be setting them up for failure. So yes, it might be limiting progress, but that's kind of life, isn't it? They're not going to have that one person attached to them all the time consistently forever and the rest of their life. So it is good to chop and change and kind of get used to different ways of working as well, within the boundaries of trying to be as consistent as possible. What other questions have we got? Remember, if you wanted to ask a question, just press the question like speech bubble below, and then I can find it. You got such good questions. Okay, this is an interesting one. If a child who refuses to listen and doesn't make eye contact and listen to stories, the one thing about listening is, how do we know they're not listening just because they're not giving eye contact? We don't know that. In fact, lots of children find it much easier to listen when they're not giving eye contact, especially those on the autism spectrum, because it's so distracting for them. It's so hard to give eye contact sometimes for some people, that all they'll be thinking about is that, and then they're not actually listening. So in order to listen, they have to look down or look away. So don't assume that just because they're not giving eye contact, they're not listening to the story. Always just assume that they are listening until proven otherwise. If they refuse to listen, then maybe it's just not that motivating to them or interesting to them. And I always think that if a child doesn't want to join one of my sessions, it's because I'm not being fun enough, or it's because I'm not making it exciting enough for them, or I'm not meeting their interests enough. And that's not their fault. That's totally on me as the teacher to make it more exciting, more interesting, more related to their interests, so that they want to join me and they want to learn, and that they see it as necessary and they see worth and value in it, and they are engaged. So maybe have a look at your learning and your story choices and how you can make those even more exciting, so that they can't resist. It's absolutely irresistible, and they couldn't wait to join yours. Okay, any advice for a child who is removing clothing when not appropriate, and we have a plan in place for when it happens, but preventing it is really challenging? Yeah, so it's great that you have a plan, but like you say, it's really good to work out why it's happening, because it's better to, manage it before the behaviour happens than after. And I understand that this could be really, really stressful for schools, and because at home they probably don't need to wear clothes. Like, that's absolutely fine. You wouldn't need to, because I once heard from an OT that some children's skin is as sensitive as an eyeball. And imagine if your whole skin was as sensitive as an eyeball, how awful it would be to put clothes on. Like, let's just think about that for a moment. Think how sensitive your eyeball is. You can literally feel like a tiny little eyelash in it, and it is so painful. Now imagine getting your hair cut. Imagine using a razor, like a shaver, or imagine wearing scratchy, itchy material or labels. So let's assume, because we don't know that it's not, let's assume that this pupil's skin is as sensitive as an eyeball. Now, how would that change your attitude to how you are managing this behaviour? I think you would be so much more empathetic and so much more tolerant, maybe, of this behaviour. But the reality is, you do need to wear clothes when out in public. That's just society, isn't it? So maybe talk to parents. Maybe it doesn't have to be school uniform though. Maybe it could be a kind of material that is seamless, maybe, that labels are removed. Maybe he wears clothes inside out, so the seams are on the outside, or socks inside out. I've seen that before. Maybe it's silk or some kind of shiny material that isn't as scratchy or itchy on his skin. That would be the first thing. So I'd look at it from a sensory regulation point of view first, maybe get parents on board, and don't worry about the colours or the school uniform. You know, it's better that he's clothed and in than unclothed and in, or, you know, not in school at all. So we want him to be in school, we want him to be regulated. Let's try and get the clothes situation sorted. And another thing I've seen, if it's the actual undressing that he is enjoying and it's not actually a dysregulation to the textures, then sometimes putting on clothes back to front can help. There's certain, so like having the zips at the back or velcros at the back can just help like manage that behaviour, so it's a little bit slower for them to get it off, so you can kind of manage that. I've seen that before as well, but ultimately that's again dealing with the after effect. I would be looking more at why they are doing that, and it's usually, I'm sure, because of either frustration or because of a sensory need. So you can find some kind of clothing to help them with that bit. But it is a hard one to deal with. I'm making it sound really easy by saying like, oh, just find some different clothing, but it is a really hard one. How do you engage a child that just wants to run? I would make their learning all about running. So if you're counting, I would count the different relays. Or if you're doing writing, I would have the uppercase letters one side of the classroom, I'll have the lowercase letters the other, and you have to run from one to the other and match them. Or if you're doing about colours, I would be, like doing a relay race with colours and matching colours, doing like a scavenger hunt outside. So you can make their special interest part of the learning. If you're in a special needs school, obviously. That's the benefit of being a SPED teacher, is we can literally grab their interest, be like, great, they like running, let's make everything running. I once wrote a full curriculum. I wish I had it, because oh my god, I know as soon as I mention this, some of you are going to want it, and I don't have it. But I once wrote a full curriculum all about Duplo, because this boy in my class, he didn't want to know anything apart from Duplo. That's all he wanted to know. He wanted to build towers with Duplo. So developed a full curriculum where it all involved Duplo. His transition object was Duplo, maths was Duplo, English was Duplo, everything was Duplo. His symbols to request and everything was on Duplo. It had a huge impact on him, because all of a sudden we were speaking his language and he was interested. So it's great that you have something that he wants to do and just run with it. Literally run with it, if you have the resources to. If you don't have the resources to, if you're a mainstream classroom or you're a special needs classroom, he's not one-to-one or whatever, then it's a little bit harder. But maybe then provide running regularly in his sensory diet throughout the day. Running, and then an organising activity, and then a grounding activity, and then back to work, and then running, and then an organising activity, and then grounding, and then back to work again. Maybe. But yeah, ideally he'd just have a running curriculum, right? Have you ever implemented stage 4 attention autism? I think some of my class are ready, but I've never taught stage 4. So for those that aren't aware, attention autism goes into 4 stages. The first is the bucket. The second is the adult leads and they kind of watch. Then the third is their turn and they need to kind of wait for their turn. And then stage 4 is them going to their table to do some kind of self-led, independent-ish activity. I've never done stage 4 because all of my activities at a table are stage 4 activities. They are all pre-prepared activities with an obvious start and an obvious finish that they can do themselves, from working from left to right. It's kind of like the workstation kind of thing. So I've never actually done it as part of my attention autism sessions, because my teaching table, it is always that. So that's a way that I've done it. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question how you want it to, but that's the honest answer. It's wonderful that so many of you are on. Okay. Right, this is going to be the last question, I think. Advice on a year 1 child wanting to sit on adult's laps facing the adult, has been told not to allow her to sit on the lap as not appropriate. Yeah, this is one that we find as well. And I do agree with it, because even though a child So children need comfort, right? And there are lots of different ways of giving that comfort without being on your lap. And I'm talking as a foster carer and a teacher here. One day, that year one child, so they're only 6 now, but one day, and it happens really quickly, they're going to be 16, and it's just not appropriate. And it's so much harder to undo that, you know, learned behaviour and way they can get that comfort than like if it prolongs. Now, this child can get that comfort from her parents or her guardian or her siblings or other people that are close to her that that's appropriate with. But I just don't feel like it's appropriate with professionals, either a foster carer or a teacher, because you can give the same comfort with them not sitting on your lap. They could sit, you could do Sherborne movements, and they could sit in front of your lap and you could give squeezes, or they could sit behind you and you can give squeezes, or you can be next to, or you can do swinging, you can do, you could be on the ball and you could do rolling. There are loads of different ways to have that similar interaction without having to be on the laps. Sometimes it's just because they like to be dipped into your legs, like it kind of feels like a hug in a way, doesn't it? So you can find different chairs and different ways of an equipment that kind of gives them that same hug feeling without it being on you. Yeah, I mean, I do it sometimes with children with mobility because that's part of their physio. But again, it's never on my lap. It's actually, they're sitting on the floor and like my legs are kind of around them for the physio. It's just something that I've always done because I have worked with adults and like teens. So I've kind of seen the transition. I've seen how hard it is to then get out of that kind of, because then at that time, then it's inappropriate behaviour, right? So, and it's really hard that's confusing for the children when all of a sudden they're allowed to do it 1 minute and then the next teacher, then they're not because it's inappropriate behaviour. It's really confusing. So if there is a way that you can give them that comfort or that sensory seeking without sitting on laps, then I would have a look at doing that. Yeah, I'll see you next Monday if you're subscribed. I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye.